I found 5 condoms in my husband's car, so I put chili on them and waited. Tôi tìm thấy 5 chiếc bao cao su trong xe của chồng tôi, thế nên tôi đã rắc ớt lên chúng và đợi. Một. I never thought my marriage of 30 years would begin to unravel because of something as small as a glove compartment. But life has a cruel way of showing you the truth when you least expect it. It was a hot afternoon in Dallas. I had borrowed my husband Mark's car to drive to the library where I work. As I reached for the registration papers in the glove box, a small black box slid out and hit my lap. At first, I thought it was some tool from his garage, but when I opened it, my hands froze. Inside were 5 shiny condoms, perfectly sealed, untouched, mocking me with their quiet presence. My chest tightened, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. We hadn't used condoms in over 20 years. There was no medical reason for them, no explanation that made sense. Just 5 clear signs of betrayal. I sat in that parking lot for what felt like hours, staring at those condoms, my whole body trembling. Anger wanted to roar out of me, to scream, to smash the windshield with my fists. But instead, I felt something colder, sharper, a silence that wrapped around me like armor. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I didn't even throw them away. No. Something inside me whispered to wait, to watch, to be smarter than my pain. That evening, I drove to a local Mexican grocery store. I picked up a bottle of the hottest chili sauce Texas has to offer. Ghost pepper extract, the kind that can burn through steel. With surgical precision, I injected each condom with fire, sealed them back, and placed the box exactly where I had found it. Then I went home, cooked dinner, and smiled at my husband across the table, like nothing had happened, because the game had just begun. And that night, I waited. Not for his excuses, not for his lies, but for the inevitable moment when silence would finally speak louder than words. Before suspicion ever entered my life, before silence became my weapon, there was a time when I believed I was the luckiest woman in Dallas. Mark and I married young, barely out of college. We didn't have money, not even close. Our first home was a small 2-bedroom starter house with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. But we had each other, and back then, that felt like enough. I remember working double shifts at the community library, coming home exhausted, and still feeling my heart lift when I saw his old pickup truck parked in the driveway. We built our life from scratch. Every nail hammered into the walls of that house, every dollar saved for Rachel's college fund, it was all a labor of love. I cooked Sunday breakfasts, stacks of pancakes dripping with syrup, bacon sizzling on the stove. He grilled burgers in the backyard on summer evenings while neighbors came over for beer and laughter. We raised Rachel together, celebrating every milestone. Her first steps on our creaky wooden floor, her high school graduation with tears streaming down both our faces. Mark used to squeeze my hand at those moments, whispering, "We did it, Lynn. We made this life." And I believed him. There were Christmas mornings filled with wrapping paper chaos, family road trips to Galveston where we sang old country songs, and long evenings on the porch swing where he would tell me about his dreams for the future. For 3 decades, I thought we were building something unshakable. Looking back, I realize I was living inside a picture-perfect frame, blind to the cracks behind the glass. To the world, we were the couple who had it all. Loyal, strong, admired. And for years I let myself believe it too. If only I had known then that the same man who once held my hand through every storm would one day become the storm itself. To everyone else, Mark was the kind of man people pointed to with admiration. At church on Sundays, he shook hands with the pastor, volunteered to organize charity drives, and even donated free oil changes for single mothers in the community. Neighbors saw him mowing the lawn early in the morning, waving politely to everyone who passed. At the high school football games, he wore his garage's logo proudly across his jacket, sponsoring the team so they could afford new uniforms. Parents would pat him on the back, calling him the kind of father every kid deserves. And every time someone praised him, I smiled along, swallowing my quiet doubts, because that was the image Mark perfected. The dependable husband, the generous neighbor, the hard-working man who built his business from nothing. People in Dallas love a story like that. Blue-collar grit turned into small-town success. And I won't lie, I was proud of him once. I believed he deserved the respect he received. But behind closed doors, the story was not so golden. Mark came home later and later, always claiming some emergency at the garage. His laughter grew hollow at our dinner table. Conversations turned short, distracted, as if he lived in another world. At night, he rolled over with his back to me, phone glowing faintly in his hand, long after I had closed my eyes. The contrast tore at me. In public, he was everyone's hero. At home, he was a stranger. And the cruelest part? No one believed me when I hinted at my unease. Friends dismissed it. "Linda, you're lucky to have him. Men like Mark don't come around often." So I learned to keep my silence. I wore the mask alongside him, smiling for photographs, laughing at church events, even while my stomach twisted with questions I couldn't voice. And yet deep down, I felt it. Something was slipping through my fingers. Something was already broken. But I had no idea just how far the cracks had spread. It started small. So small that I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Mark had always been predictable, a creature of habit. He left the garage at 6 sharp, walked through the door by 6:30, and dinner was usually on the table by 7. For decades, that routine never changed, until one evening it did. He walked in past 8 o'clock, smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. Not the musky Old Spice he had worn since college, but something lighter, sharper, almost sweet. He brushed past me, muttering about a late customer, and went straight to the shower. By the time he came down for dinner, his clothes were neatly tucked in the hamper, and his hair was damp. The next week, it happened again, and then again. Excuses piled up. A broken alternator, an employee no-show, a late parts delivery. I wanted to believe him, I really did. After all, hadn't this man stood beside me through every hardship? But the perfume lingering on his jacket told a different story. Another sign appeared at the dinner table. Mark used to eat heartily, laughing between bites, but now he picked at his food, distracted, his eyes flickering to his phone every few minutes. Messages popped up and he would tilt the screen just out of my view. When I asked who it was, he shrugged. "Just work, Linda. Don't worry." But I did worry. At night, his restlessness grew unbearable. He turned away from me in bed, scrolling through his phone under the dim light. Sometimes he'd slip out of the room altogether, claiming he couldn't sleep. I'd find him in the kitchen, staring blankly into a glass of whiskey. All the while, I tried to silence the storm inside me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not to be that kind of wife. But my gut screamed louder each day, and my heart whispered the question I dreaded most. Who was my husband when he wasn't with me? The night it truly cut me happened on a Wednesday. Rachel had called earlier, saying she might stop by for dinner, so I made Mark's favorite, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. I set the table with care, even lit a candle, hoping maybe the warmth of home would pull him back to me. He walked in late again, reeking faintly of whiskey. His tie was loosened, his shirt half untucked. When I told him Rachel might be coming, he groaned, "God, not tonight, Linda. I'm exhausted." His words stung, but I swallowed the hurt and tried to keep the peace. Halfway through dinner, his phone buzzed. He picked it up without hesitation, smirking at the screen. I asked softly, "Who's that?" He didn't even look at me when he replied, "Just Jess." Jess. The name slipped out so naturally, so carelessly, like it belonged in our house, at our table. But my name isn't Jess. My name is Linda. And in that single moment, I felt 30 years of marriage unravel in one careless syllable. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. My chest tightened. My ears rang. He must have realized his mistake because his face drained of color. He stammered, I meant Jeff. From the garage. You know Jeff." His excuse was clumsy, insulting, but I didn't argue. I simply nodded and lowered my eyes to my plate, pushing around the food I no longer had the strength to eat. That was the first wound. The moment my heart began to bleed quietly, invisibly. He went on eating, pretending nothing had happened, while I sat there, drowning in silence. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw his phone across the room, but instead, I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood, because I knew then words wouldn't protect me. Silence would. And in that silence, a plan was beginning to take shape. 2. The day I found them was supposed to be ordinary. Mark had asked me to drive his car to the mechanic for a routine check because he was too busy at the garage. I slipped into the driver's seat, inhaling the faint scent of leather mixed with something sweeter, unfamiliar. A trace of perfume clung to the upholstery, and my stomach tightened. I told myself not to overthink. Maybe a customer had left it. Maybe. But as I pulled into the mechanic's lot, the glove compartment rattled open with the bump of the curb. Out tumbled a small box. My hands shook as I picked it up, recognizing the brand instantly. Condoms. Not one, not two, 5. They gleamed under the afternoon sun, mocking me, daring me to deny what I already knew deep in my bones. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse pounding in my ears. We hadn't touched condoms in over 2 decades. Mark had even joked once that they were a young man's game. Yet here they were, fresh, unopened, sitting in his car, like silent proof of betrayal. I wanted to scream, to storm into his garage and hurl them in his face, to ask him whose perfume lingered in this car, whose name he whispered when he thought I was asleep. But instead, I sat frozen in the driver's seat, staring at those small packages as tears burned behind my eyes. Then slowly, something inside me shifted. The tears didn't fall. My rage didn't explode. Instead, a chilling calm wrapped around me. My mind grew sharper, clearer, as if betrayal had flipped a switch. I carefully placed the box back where I had found it, closing the glove compartment with steady hands. Because this wasn't the moment to confront. Not yet. No, this was the moment to wait, to watch, to let him bury himself in his own lies. And deep in my chest, the silence hardened into resolve. Driving home that afternoon, the box of condoms still burned in my memory like a brand. Every mile on that road pulled me deeper into old memories, forcing me to see my marriage not as the love story I once believed, but as a chain of sacrifices I had made for a man who never truly valued them. I remembered the early years when I gave up graduate school to help Mark open his garage. He had a dream, and I believed in him more than I believed in myself. I took extra shifts at the library, paid the bills, cooked every meal, while he poured every dollar into his business. "One day it'll pay off, Linda," he promised. and I trusted him. I remembered Christmases when I bought Rachel's gifts with coupons and spare change because Mark claimed the garage had a slow season. I smiled as Rachel unwrapped her dollhouse, never letting her see the exhaustion behind my eyes. Meanwhile, Mark always found money for new tools, new tires, new trucks, and the anniversaries. God, how I cherished them. I would spend weeks planning little surprises, a scrapbook of our memories, homemade dinners with candles. He'd kiss my cheek, distracted, saying he was too tired for anything special. I told myself love wasn't about grand gestures, that loyalty was enough. Now, with those condoms seared into my mind, every compromise, every tear, every sleepless night felt like evidence in a case I had been too blind to prosecute. My sacrifices had built his life, his business, his comfort, and he had repaid me with deceit. The weight of it nearly crushed me as I pulled into our driveway. 30 years of love suddenly looked like 30 years of blindness. But even as my chest ached, another feeling rose inside me. Fire. Because if he thought my silence meant weakness, he was about to learn how wrong he truly was. That night, while Mark snored beside me, the image of those 5 condoms burned behind my closed eyes. Every inhale, every exhale he took felt like an insult. He slept so soundly, unaware that the woman lying inches from him had seen through every lie. I didn't move. I didn't confront him. I didn't throw the box on the bed and demand the truth. That's what he would expect. He'd argue, deny, twist the story until I doubted my own eyes. No, I told myself. This time, I would not give him the stage. I would not give him my tears. Instead, I thought about silence, how it had always been my shield. And for the first time, I realized it could also be my sword. The next day, I drove to a small Mexican grocery store on the edge of Dallas. The kind of place where the shelves gleam with jars of hot sauces, so fiery they come with warning labels. I walked past the ordinary bottles until my hand landed on one marked ghost pepper extract. The clerk raised an eyebrow as he rang it up. "Careful with that, ma'am," he said. "That stuff can burn through anything." I only smiled. Back home, I pulled out the box of condoms I had stolen from Mark's glove compartment. With surgical precision, I slid a needle into each one and injected a careful dose of the ghost pepper liquid. My hands didn't shake. My heartbeat stayed steady. It felt almost mechanical, like I was stitching together a new version of myself with every drop of fire. When I finished, I placed them neatly back in the box, sealed and untouched, as if nothing had happened. Then I returned them to his car, in the exact spot where I had found them. That evening, I made dinner, poured his whiskey, kissed his cheek. I laughed at his small talk, even touched his hand, because he didn't know. But I did, and the waiting had only just begun. A strange calm settled over the house in the days that followed. It was almost eerie, like the quiet before a Texas thunderstorm. Mark began acting different. One evening, he came home early with a bouquet of red roses, the first in years. "For you, sweetheart," he said, placing them awkwardly on the counter. I forced a smile, my heart pounding, because I knew flowers were not gifts of love. They were apologies in disguise. The next day, he cooked breakfast: scrambled eggs, bacon, even toast slightly burned the way he knew I liked it. He kissed my forehead as if 30 years of neglect could be erased with butter and salt. I played along, sipping my coffee, watching his every move with silent curiosity. By the third day, he was calling me darlin' again, a name I hadn't heard from his lips in over a decade. He asked about my day at the library, about Rachel's cases, about the books I was reading. He acted like a husband rediscovering his wife. But I knew better, because kindness doesn't appear out of nowhere. Guilt does. Every affectionate gesture only deepened my certainty. The box had been found. The trap had been sprung. He just hadn't realized yet that it wasn't fate. It was me. One night, while washing dishes, I caught him staring at me strangely, almost studying my face. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I dried my hands, smiled gently, and replied, "I'm just tired." He nodded slowly, suspicion flickering in his eyes. For a moment, I thought he might press further, but then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly, slipped it into his pocket, and mumbled something about needing to check the garage. I watched him walk out the door, roses wilting on the counter behind me, and I knew the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. It happened late on a Saturday night. Mark had disappeared after dinner, saying he had to check on some paperwork at the garage. Hours passed, and he didn't return. I went to bed alone, the silence pressing against my chest like a weight. At 3 a.m., the phone rang. My heart lurched as I answered. A nurse's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Mrs. Carter, your husband is at Dallas General. You should come right away." When I arrived, the fluorescent lights of the ER flickered overhead, and there he was, Mark, pale, sweating, clutching his lower body with agony etched across his face. Beside him stood Jessica, young, beautiful, mascara streaked from tears, her hand gripping his like they were the married couple. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply stepped closer, folding my arms as the doctor explained Mark's condition. "Severe chemical burns, highly unusual. We're still trying to determine the cause." Jessica burst out, "Tell her, Mark! You have to tell her the truth!" Mark's eyes darted to me, wide with terror. His lips quivered, searching for words. The room went still, all eyes on him. I tilted my head, my voice calm, steady. "There's no need, Jessica. I already know." Confusion flickered across her face. Mark opened his mouth, but I raised a hand to silence him. Then I leaned in, my words like ice. "I'm the one who spiced up your little secret." Jessica's jaw dropped. The doctor blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Mark's face drained of what little color it had left. For the first time in decades, he had no excuse, no story, no mask to hide behind. I straightened, my heart steady, my voice sharp as glass. "You wanted fire, Mark? You got it." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving him writhing in both pain and shame. Because the silence had spoken, and it had roared louder than any scream I could have given. 3. When I left the hospital that night, the cool Dallas air wrapped around me like a shield. I drove home in silence, replaying the look on Mark's face, the terror, the humiliation. But beneath that calm victory, a deeper question gnawed at me. What now? The answer came the next morning in the form of my daughter, Rachel. She showed up at my front door, her briefcase in hand, her sharp eyes scanning my face like she could read every secret I had buried. "Mom," she said softly, stepping inside. "I know." I froze. "Know what?" She placed her briefcase on the table, opened it, and slid a stack of documents toward me. Bank statements, property deeds, hidden accounts, transactions Mark had kept off our shared finances. "I've been following Dad for months," she admitted. "Something didn't feel right. I wanted proof before I came to you." Tears pricked my eyes, but not from sadness, from pride. My little girl, the baby I once rocked to sleep, had grown into a woman who could stand taller than her father's lies. Rachel's voice sharpened. "He's been funneling money into a side account, probably for her. But we have everything we need. If you're ready, Mom, I can take him down in court." For the first time in weeks, I let out a laugh. Short, sharp, edged with disbelief. "All this time I thought I was alone," I whispered. "And you were watching out for me." Rachel reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You taught me strength, Mom. Now it's my turn to give it back." I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders. The silence had carried me this far, but now I had something even stronger, an ally, my own daughter. And with her by my side, Mark's empire of lies didn't stand a chance. In a town like ours, secrets don't stay buried for long. Dallas might be a sprawling city, but communities are small, and whispers travel faster than truth. Within a week of Mark's hospital stay, rumors had spread from the garage to the pews of our church, winding their way into every corner of our lives. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. People talk, and when they do, stories grow legs. By the following Sunday, I could feel the stares as I walked into the sanctuary. Women leaned toward one another, hands cupped over their mouths. Men gave me polite nods, their eyes flickering with pity. Mark, bandaged and limping, tried to hold his head high as he followed behind me. But the once proud man, who used to shake hands with everyone, barely received a glance. Parents who once praised him for sponsoring the football team now pulled their sons a little closer. His friends avoided his eyes, suddenly busy with conversations that didn't include him. After service, the pastor approached me gently. "Linda, if you ever need support, the church is here for you." His words were kind, but his eyes said more. He knew. They all knew. The garage, once bustling with loyal customers, began to empty. Cars stopped pulling into the lot. Employees whispered behind his back. Even Jessica, his precious secret, had vanished, leaving him to face the wreckage alone. For decades, Mark wore the mask of a devoted husband and a respectable businessman. He craved admiration more than love, respect more than honesty. And now, the mask had shattered. The pieces scattered across the very community he once sought to impress. I watched quietly as his empire of lies crumbled. Not with screams, not with vengeance, but with silence and truth, doing their slow, merciless work. Because sometimes, the sharpest punishment isn't what you shout in anger. It's what you no longer need to say at all. For weeks, I let Mark drown in the whispers of the community, his proud posture shrinking more each day. But there was still one thread left to pull, and Rachel, the lawyer in her, knew exactly how to tug at it. She showed up one evening with a folder tucked under her arm. "Mom," she said, sliding it across the kitchen table, "you need to see this." Inside were photographs. Jessica, the woman who had stood at Mark's hospital bedside like some tragic heroine, wrapped around another man's arms. Different locations, different nights. A bar downtown, a hotel lobby. Even outside the very garage where Mark thought he was her only secret. I stared at the images, my stomach churning. Not from jealousy, but from the cruel irony. The man Mark risked his family for, the man he burned his marriage for, was nothing more than a puppet in Jessica's little show. Rachel's voice cut sharp as a blade. "She was never in love with him, Mom. She was using him. Money, gifts, a free ride, and the moment things got messy, she moved on." The final blow was a copy of a bank transfer. Thousands of dollars siphoned from Mark's hidden account straight into Jessica's name. The trail was undeniable. I closed the folder slowly, feeling a strange mix of fury and relief. Fury that Mark's betrayal had been for nothing. Relief that justice had a way of righting itself. The next morning, I left the folder on Mark's desk without a word. Hours later, I heard the crash of glass shattering in his office, followed by a guttural cry I had never heard before. He had seen it. He knew. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed him. And somehow, that was the sharpest punishment of all. Because now, the man who once thought he controlled everything was left with nothing. No wife, no respect, and not even the mistress he had gambled it all for. The night after Mark discovered Jessica's betrayal, he came to me like a broken man. His once proud shoulders slumped, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. He found me in the living room, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, reading quietly like it was any other evening. "Linda," he whispered, sinking to his knees in front of me. "Please. I made mistakes. I was stupid. But you're my wife. You've always been my home. Don't leave me." For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. This was not the man who strutted through church aisles, shaking hands like a politician. This was not the man who barked excuses when he came home late. This was a shell, desperate and trembling, begging for the stability he had so carelessly destroyed. He reached for my hands, clutching them tight, tears spilling onto my skin. "I'll change. I'll shut down the garage if that's what you want. I'll do counseling. Just don't walk away. Don't end us, Linda." His words should have cracked me. 30 years of history sat between us. Holidays, birthdays, a lifetime of memories. Once upon a time, I might have believed him, but I didn't anymore. I pulled my hands back slowly, folding them in my lap. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "Mark, I stayed silent for years, thinking silence meant peace. But now I understand it was survival. And I won't survive you anymore." His face crumbled. He tried again, sobbing, swearing he would make it right. But I rose to my feet, my blanket slipping from my shoulders, and looked down at him with all the calm I had left. "You already burned everything, Mark," I said softly. "Now you can live in the ashes." And with that, I walked upstairs, leaving him kneeling on the carpet, drowning in the emptiness he had created. The morning of the first court hearing, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything lies scattered and broken. I dressed simply, a navy dress and pearl earrings Rachel had given me years ago. No drama, no theatrics, just dignity. Rachel drove us downtown, her briefcase resting on the seat between us. She looked every inch the lawyer she had worked so hard to become. Sharp, steady, ready for war. I glanced at her and felt a surge of pride. My daughter wasn't just my ally. She was my shield. When we walked into the courtroom, Mark was already there. He looked smaller somehow, hunched in his suit, his face pale. The confident man who once thrived on attention now sat avoiding every eye. Jessica wasn't there. She had vanished weeks ago, leaving him to face the wreckage alone. The judge called the case, and Rachel stood with a confidence that filled the room. She laid out everything: the financial records, the secret accounts, the photographs, the years of betrayal. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth was heavy enough. Mark's lawyer tried to spin excuses: stress, loneliness, midlife crisis, but they fell flat against the cold weight of evidence. And through it all, I sat in silence, my hands folded neatly in my lap, my eyes steady on the man who had once been my husband. When the judge finally ruled, The gavel's crack echoed like justice itself. The house awarded to me, a share of the garage, financial support secured. Mark's empire had crumbled in public record, carved into law. As we left the courtroom, Rachel slipped her arm through mine. "It's done, Mom," she said softly. And for the first time in years, I felt it. The quiet wasn't survival anymore. It was freedom. 4. After the verdict, Rachel and I walked out of the courthouse into the Texas sun. Cameras clicked in the distance, reporters whispering, but I ignored them. My steps were steady, my head high. On paper, I had won. But inside, I still felt like I was holding my breath. We drove home in silence, Rachel's hand resting gently on mine as she navigated the Dallas traffic. When we pulled into the driveway, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "Rest, Mom. You deserve it." Then she left, her taillights disappearing down the street, leaving me alone for the first time in weeks. I stepped into the house, the same house where I had cooked thousands of meals, folded countless loads of laundry, waited through endless late nights. It was mine now, legally mine. Yet as I walked from room to room, every corner carried echoes of him. His laugh at the dinner table, his boots by the door, his voice calling me Lynn when he wanted something. The weight of it pressed down until I couldn't move. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch. For weeks, I had been stone, a wall of silence, a strategist in a battle I never asked for. But now, with no one watching, no one to protect, the wall cracked. The first tear slipped down my cheek, hot and unstoppable. Then another. Soon I was sobbing, the kind of raw, aching sobs that come from years of swallowing pain. My hands shook as I covered my face, my chest heaving with 30 years of grief, anger, and disappointment. But as the storm passed, something shifted. The tears no longer tasted of sorrow, they tasted of release. For the first time, I wasn't crying because I was broken. I was crying because I was free. And in that freedom, I finally began to breathe again. In the weeks after the divorce, I found myself waking up to silence that no longer hurt. The bed was empty, yes, but it was also mine. The air in the house felt lighter, like it had been waiting years to exhale. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to walk on eggshells, anticipating Mark's moods. I could simply be. Healing didn't come all at once. It arrived in small, fragile moments. Like the first time I walked into the library without a ring on my finger and realized no one looked at me with pity, only respect. Or the afternoon I dusted off the easel in the garage, the one I had tucked away when Rachel was little, and painted until my hands were covered in color. I joined a women's support group at church, not to cry about what I'd lost, but to share how I had survived. Sitting in that circle, listening to other women's stories of betrayal and resilience, I realized my silence had given me something powerful, perspective. And sharing it gave me strength I didn't know I had. One evening, Rachel stopped by with takeout. We sat on the porch swing, the same one where Mark and I once dreamed about the future. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Mom, you look lighter." I smiled because she was right. The weight was gone. The house was the same, but I was different. I began to fill my days not with suspicion or waiting, but with living, painting, gardening, volunteering at the library for children's reading hours. Slowly, I started to recognize the woman in the mirror again. Not the wife defined by sacrifice, but the woman defined by her own choices. I had survived betrayal. Now I was building something greater than survival. I was building myself. While my life was slowly rebuilding, Mark's was unraveling. The man who once strutted through Dallas with pride now moved like a shadow. His garage, once the heartbeat of his success, sat nearly empty. Loyal customers had drifted away, whispers of scandal following him like a curse. No one wanted to trust their car, or their respect, to a man who couldn't even honor his own family. I heard he had fired half his staff, unable to cover their wages. The parking lot, once filled with trucks and cars waiting for service, now lay barren under the Texas sun. At night, neighbors told me they saw him sitting alone inside, drinking from a paper cup, staring at the walls as if answers might appear there. Jessica, of course, was gone. She had taken his money, his pride, and whatever scraps of affection he had left to give. I imagined him replaying their memories, realizing every kiss, every laugh had been a transaction. And now, with no wife to shield him and no mistress to distract him, he was left with the truth. He had gambled 30 years of loyalty for nothing. The church turned its back. Invitations to barbecues, block parties, even community fundraisers stopped coming. Parents no longer nodded in respect at football games because he wasn't there anymore. He wasn't welcome. Sometimes I would see him from a distance, hunched over, hair unkempt, a man aging faster than his years. He never approached me. Perhaps he knew there was nothing left to say. And though part of me pitied him, another part felt justice in its purest form. Because betrayal always collects its debt. And Mark was paying every dollar of it, not in cash, but in loneliness, regret, and the slow collapse of the life he once bragged about. He had lost everything, and I had finally found myself. By the end of that year, Mark was no longer the man people once admired. His decline wasn't dramatic like a sudden collapse. It was slow, humiliating, the kind of unraveling you can't look away from. The garage shut down first. Without customers, without employees, it was only a matter of time. I drove past one afternoon and saw the for lease sign nailed to the door. The windows were dusty, tools scattered, a graveyard of his pride. He sold the truck next. That old pickup he once polished every Saturday now sat on a stranger's driveway. Word spread that he had moved into a dingy one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the kind with flickering lights and peeling linoleum, a far cry from the house he once lorded over. Friends? Gone. The same men who slapped his back at church now crossed the street to avoid him. The same neighbors who praised him at barbecues now pretended not to see. Respect evaporated, and in its place, whispers followed him everywhere. Rachel heard from a colleague that he had even tried to reach Jessica again, calls unanswered, texts ignored. She had bled him dry and vanished without a trace. The final blow came when I saw him at the grocery store one evening. He was thinner, his clothes hanging loose, his eyes hollow. He spotted me in the aisle, holding a basket of discount items, and for a second, his face softened, like the Mark I once knew was begging to come back. But I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I simply walked past him, my head high, my silence louder than any insult I could deliver. Because there was nothing left to say. His ruin was complete, and every piece of it was a debt he had written with his own hands. And as for me, I wasn't ruined. I was reborn. Looking back now, I realize betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. For 30 years, I thought my silence was weakness. I thought swallowing pain made me strong. But the truth? Silence became my sharpest weapon, my shield, and eventually, my freedom. Mark's downfall wasn't my doing alone. I didn't scream at him in public or tear apart his life with rage. I simply stopped protecting him. I let the truth breathe. And once the truth had air, It burned through everything he had built on lies. People ask me if I regret the years I gave him. My answer is no. Those years made me who I am. They gave me Rachel, my daughter, my ally, my mirror of strength. They taught me that sacrifice without respect is wasted, but sacrifice with purpose can light the way forward. Now my days are quiet but full. I paint. I garden. I laugh with Rachel over takeout on the porch. I share my story with women who sit in circles at church, holding back tears, wondering if they're strong enough to leave, to rebuild, to breathe again. I look them in the eye and tell them, yes, you are. Because betrayal isn't the end of a life, it's the start of a new one. If you are listening to this, remember, no matter how many years you've given, no matter how deep the wound, you are not powerless. Your silence, your patience, your dignity, they are stronger than rage, and when the time comes, they can cut sharper than any scream. Mark lost everything. I gained myself. And that is a trade I will never regret. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, another woman needs to hear that her silence can also become her sword. So that's how the story closes, my dear friends. You're still here with me, right? If you've stayed all the way until now, then I know something in this story has touched your heart in its own quiet way. And maybe that's because betrayal, loss, and starting over are things we all face in one form or another. The Stoics used to say, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And I believe that's true. We carry pain in our minds, but when we step back, we realize we're stronger than the storm. Silence isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over chaos. If my story gave you even a little courage today, then please, like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe. Because healing is a journey, and none of us should walk it alone.